Randy Grimes, thank you for joining us, good sir, on Knocking Doors Down.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Heck yeah. I mean, come on. It's not every day we speak to a 10-year vet of the NFL, both football fans. He's the fanatic. I'm just a normal fan.
Wrong team, though.
Just kidding. But of course, Randy played for 10 seasons with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So pretty cool to, the team we spent shed blood on the field for, getting that Super Bowl. That had to be pretty badass.
Oh, it was, man. I was so excited. When they signed Brady, I didn't know what he was going to bring physically. What is this, his 100th year in the league? I didn't know what he still had left in the tank, but I knew he'd sell a lot of tickets, and I knew that he would bring a lot of optimism and confidence.
Sure. And then Gronk, they bring in Gronk. So that was like, oh, gosh, now what are they going to do?
Yeah, but these are guys that have been there before, and they know what it takes. And to go out and win those 3 big road games in the playoff on the road,
that was huge.
That was huge. And once they did that, I was predicting at the Super Bowl all week that they were going to win by, a couple of touchdowns. So, it worked out really good. And I think that's what makes Brady, Gronk worth every penny that they pay him, is that, because I know as a former offensive lineman, man, I wanted to come back to the huddle to a quarterback that was confident and in charge. And, guys like DeBerg and Steve Young, I wanted to come back and have those guys as my captain. And it makes a big difference.
Well, and that's the thing, too. When I heard that when I seen that they were playing the Chiefs, I'm a Niner fan, and the Chiefs obviously did me dirty last year. So I wanted the Bucks to just beat the piss out of them, and they did. So I was rooting for your team as well.
Well, that's probably why we won then.
Yeah, it was definitely on me. So I feel like I should get, if not a ring, some kind of 10% or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll make sure they send you a ring, okay?
You know what? I would appreciate that, Randy. I knew I liked you.
Yeah, would you wear it to your San Fran? You know you would.
I wouldn't wear it just because be afraid of somebody wanting to steal it. That's all it would be. It'd be like, oh, that goes in a case at home in like a shadow box.
I might wear it, man. I might wear it.
Anyways, we're not talking with Randy just to bullshit about football, although we probably will more throughout because, boy, we got to know what it was like having a 10-year, decade-long career. But, of course, you're doing great work with Randy Grimes Speaks. More people find out randygrimespeaks.com. And you're really highlighting that based upon your own personal story, those injuries and things that pile up in a profession, it definitely, a different day and age, which we want to ask you, some of your thoughts later on about, the rule changes, especially to protect players, but led to you having an opioid addiction, and boy, how did it just start? Was it just nagging injury over nagging injury, or was it post-career that the injuries were still present, or a combination of both?
Yeah, I can remember being a rookie and getting to the locker room in Tampa Bay, and I was having a conversation with Leroy Selman. He had a locker right next to mine, and he was a legend. That was a guy that I had followed all the way from Oklahoma while he played at Oklahoma to the Bucs. I was a kid in Waco, Texas football, And I remember having a conversation with him. He was like one of the first big time vets that I ever just, had a talk with. And I remember the first thing I learned from him is that football wasn't a game anymore. It was now a job. As soon as I stepped foot in that locker room as a 2nd round draft pick of the Bucs, it became a job. And the second thing I learned was that you do whatever you have to stay out on the field, because guys, this is back in the era where that warrior mentality, where you big boys don't cry, you dust yourself off and you get back in the huddle and you keep your mouth shut. Sure. This is back when we were beating the hell out of each other all week long. And hopefully we had enough left in the tank on Sunday to play, because if you don't practice hard, you're not going to play hard. That mentality, that junction boy bullshit mentality that cost so many guys back in my era their careers. So what that looked like for me, doing whatever I had to stay out on the field, was taking handfuls of pain pills every day to practice through the injuries and through the pain. And of just the knocks and bruises of everyday practice, you know.
Mhm.
And I never looked at it for what it really was, which was a full-blown addiction. I just looked at it like a necessary evil to be the best center that I could be, to be
Right.
to feed my family playing a kid's game, you know, to be all pro, to be to get that next big contract. You know, it was a necessary evil. And you know, I'm getting it from team doctors and team trainers, so it must be okay, right?
Mhm. Right.
I'm getting it
It's not like you were
from
hiding it.
teammates, so it must be the culture of the league. So, you know, I never looked at it for what it really was, and that was a full-blown addiction.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, yeah, getting it from the team, of course, team doctors, but yeah, just a totally different mentality. And I'm sure, and we're not asking you to out anyone, but you weren't the only one in the locker room that was operating that way, let alone the league.
No, and if you've ever seen North Dallas 40, that's what I kind of compare it to. It's that North Dallas 40 mentality. You know, I wasn't the only one willing to do whatever I had to stay out on that field. And you know, if you weren't staying out on that field, somebody else was going to be in your position. First of all, second of all, you were going to get a reputation of always being on the injury report, always being worked on by the trainers, always in line to see the doctor. And I was not going to be that guy, because that's a reputation you were never going to get away from in what was sure to be a short NFL career. So, you know, I suffered in silence, and I threw down pain pills every day. And, you know, I would come home at night and crash on the couch because it wasn't unusual. We just got through beating the hell out of each other in 110-degree heat in Tampa, Florida, on the practice field next to the airport with jet fumes everywhere. And coming home and crashing was not a sign to my family that anything else was going on. And you know, I was also taking handfuls of benzos every night to get to sleep,
Mhm.
you know, through everything that was going on. And so, you know, these are just ways that I justified it. This is ways that I hid it from my family. And, you know, what's kind of incredible is that in the 8.5, 9 years that this was going on, you know, not once did anybody ever say, Randy, why are you slurring your words, or nodding off in meetings, or late to practice every day? Or why are you the last to leave the building every night and pills are missing out of the drug safe? Nobody ever questioned me on that, because I was always playing my ass off.
Yeah.
We used to have a drug safe in the middle of our training room, and it was never locked. I mean, you could always just go get whatever you wanted out of there. And if it ever was locked, we had 3 white guys for the entire decade that I played in Tampa. 3 white guys started on defense, and their jersey numbers were the combination to the safe. So that never changed. And, but, you know, I usually didn't even have to do that. I could just ask for it, and I'd get enough till the next day. I'd ask again, get enough for the next day. And that was pretty much the routine back then.
Go ahead. Oh no, so
You know, when we used to, I tell this story all the time. What other profession, when we used to, on our road trips back on the plane, we'd have a trainer that would walk down the aisle, and he had 2 medicine bottles in his hand. You know, one of them was an opiate, one of them was a benzo, and then there'd be another guy behind him with 2 beers. And they would hand everybody whatever they needed, whatever they asked for, and then they would hand you 2 beers. When we were leaving our locker room, this is back in the 80s, you know, 80s and early 90s, when we were leaving our locker room after a Sunday afternoon game, there would be somebody standing there with a pill bottle, pouring out pills in people's hands, handing you 2 beers also as you left the building, and you had your car keys in your hand. What other occupation does that, you know? And not that I'm blaming, I don't blame the NFL. I don't blame the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was just the mentality back then.
That's
you know?
just how it was. Yeah.
That's how it was.
a complete
That's
lack
how it was.
of
It probably was
education.
like that at San Francisco. It was probably like that at the Raiders. It was probably like that everywhere.
Yeah. So a complete lack of education during the times of the effects of these types of medications, let alone addiction. You know, it still carried a lot of stigma at that time. You know, even 40 years after AA was originated, that, you know, And it was looked at as probably a weakness, I would think, especially in that time and day and age.
Yeah, but you know what? It wasn't even about that. It was about, nobody ever thought about that. It was about getting back out on the field. It was about playing as hard as you could for as long as you could. It was about not giving up your spot. It was about you're only as good as your last game. That kind of, nobody ever, people didn't ask me about nodding off and slurring words because they were probably uneducated at the time, but it was about Randy's still playing good. So why rock the boat?
Yeah. Well,
it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing.
And you were in a hell of a position. Of course, a lot of the stuff that maybe we'll ask your take on a little bit later on in the conversation, that, being a center, a lot of that heads up stuff. And of course, concussions were looked at totally different at that time too. I remember getting them when I was an athlete in high school in the 90s, got one, and it was, you got your bell rung. Nobody looked at it to that regard. So like you said, the mentality was just totally fucking different than it is now.
Yeah. I mean, what the concussion protocol was back then was, how many fingers am I holding up? If you could get within 5, right, then they put you back out on the field. One time up at the Silverdome, I got knocked out so bad that I walked off the field and sat on the Lions bench, and their doctor sent me back into the game. So there wasn't much of a protocol back then.
Well, the Lions probably would have loved to have you, so that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well,
right. You're probably right.
Let's jump back to young Randy. Growing up and kind of going through college. Of course, you played at Baylor. But what were you like as a kid? Was football? Texas. It is a football state. Was it a family thing? And what were you like as a kid? Were you rambunctious? Always involved in sports and activities?
Everything you just said. I want to say football was religion, but of course in East Texas, religion was a religion, but football was a close second. And everything in my family focused around me and my brother and football and even my sister. She was a cheerleader. She was a majorette. She was on that football field at halftime. My parents were at every game, and the thing about my parents is that I had a great childhood, and I never once saw my parents use any kind of substance. Never saw them drink, never saw them take anything. Even my brother and sister, they never went down that road. There was really no history of addiction in our family. Maybe a distant uncle that I'd never met, but there was really no history there. And so I'm kind of a unicorn in that sense, as far as I'm not coming from a family with a history of substance abuse. But man, I had a great upbringing. Football, Friday night lights, pasture parties, pickup trucks, girls. I mean, that was life in East Texas, and everything focused around football. And it was something that always came easy for me. I was just good at football. And I was able to get a scholarship pretty much anywhere in the Southwest Conference back then. Anywhere I wanted to go, Arkansas, A&M, Texas, and I chose Baylor. I had a sister there. I wanted to be in the good Southern Baptist that I am. I wanted to make my mama happy, and I wanted to play for Grant Taft. I thought that was a great opportunity. Had some great players there. Singletary was there. Ronnie Barnes. We just had a lot of good players there at the time, and sure enough, we won the Southwest Conference my sophomore year. Got crushed by Alabama in the Cotton Bowl, but we had a great team. And then my freshman year, we won the Peach Bowl. So we had some great players, and it was a great decision. And those were the best days of my life. I met my wife my very first day, my freshman year at Baylor. Went out that night, and then we got married after our junior year. So she was going to teach, I was going to coach. We were going to live that all-American dream. And even in college, there was no history of substance abuse. Yeah, I'd have a beer or two with the guys every now and then, but most of the time I was with her, a preacher's daughter, and we were just hanging out.
Where you are now may not be where you came from. The choices you make today may spiral out of control or spin you in the right direction. Discover a riveting, true story of how Carlos Vieira nearly destroyed his life and lived to tell about it. Stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness. Knocking doors down along the way. And don't miss others telling their powerful stories on our podcast. Visit kddmediacompany.com.
See, that's what I was going to ask you. Playing in, high school and then going to Baylor, you're obviously playing at a very high level. No pain pills or anything like that ever came into play until the NFL?
Nothing, yeah. Not until the NFL.
Yeah.
But you know what? The game picked up so much in the NFL.
Sure,
it was
yeah.
much faster, quicker, stronger.
Because it's the best of everybody. Every college you've ever played, it's handpicked the best, and they're all thrown into the professional league. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and they're even on your practice fields. They're on your own teams. They're on your practice squads, the best of the best. And, you really had to up your game when you got out there or you weren't going to last very long.
Yeah, well, and like you said, I mean, that's it, because I wanted to ask how you met your wife when she works, you two work so close hand in hand in what you're doing. But at what point then did, you mentioned early on in your career, but did you fastly, the two of you have a family, and the kids and stuff like that? And because you mentioned subsequently coming home, nodding out, and the family just accepting it as normal.
Yeah, I mean, I had kids, and I wasn't expected to do much. I'd been practicing all day. I've been working my ass off all day on the practice field. So she didn't really have great expectations that I was going to come home and spend 2 or 3 hours with the kids. She knew the routine. She would see me. She saw practice. She'd watch practice. She knew what we were going through. So, I mean, she's the one who did most of the raising of the kids back then, because, I was present, but I wasn't present. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And, but she understood that was part of the sacrifice that we make as to be professional players. And then, I was gone a lot during the season, but she also knew that the off season was coming and that she would have me for 5 to 6 months,
Right. Well, were you able to, during that downtime, steer away from the opioids, or was there a point, and the benzos, as you mentioned, or was there a point where it just became a daily repetitive habit?
Yeah, I mean, the whole time it was a daily habit, when I didn't have those trainers or drug safes or doctors at the team facility to hand it out, I would, we would spend every off season in Houston, and, I would always just find ways to continue getting it, whether it was doctor shopping or having multiple doctors. I mean, I was Randy Grimes. I had a ring on my finger. I could walk in any doctor's office and get just about anything I wanted. I mean, I had x-rays, I had everything, It was all this, the manipulation that we as drug addicts do to get what we need.
Yeah, no, I was curious about it because then again, too, for people that maybe aren't getting the relevance, it's not how it is today where doctors, it's electronically tracked in a way, and who's going into where, as well as your prescription. They were handwritten prescriptions, and a guy had the little pad with the needle that he put it on, went, okay, Mr. Grimes got it from Dr. So-and-so, and Dr., they didn't monitor it the way it was. So it was probably, much more readily available and easier for you to go through that process.
Sure. And, the pill mills existed back then. You could find doctors, you could find anything that you need. And you're right. The pharmacies weren't linked. The doctors weren't linked. And, it was the wild, wild west back then, not only in Texas, but in Florida. And it only got worse and worse and worse, as time went on.
So starting it in your, beginning of your career in the NFL, at what point did you realize, shit, this is a problem?
You know what? I had a couple years before I retired, I had a seizure on the beach one day. I'd had surgery on my shoulder. It was in the off season. And anybody knows when you withdraw off benzos, you're going to have a seizure. And I had to get off the benzos to have the surgery. And I didn't have any clue that would happen, that if I tried to get off of the halcyon that I was taking. And I had a seizure on the beach. And so they put me in the hospital. I just had shoulder surgery. They put me in the hospital. They thought it had something to do with the surgery. Something was going on. They tested me for a seizure disorder to see if I had epilepsy. They had all these tests, and nobody ever could figure out anything. So they just wrote it off to having something to do with the shoulder surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But the more research that I did on it, and this is back before you could just Google anything, the more research I did on it, I realized that this had something to do with the benzodiazepines that I was taking to sleep every night.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew then that I had a problem, but I didn't know what to do about it. And when was I going to do it? And who was I going to tell? And all that. So, life just kept on. And, I came back from that shoulder surgery. I was still playing good. And it was just life as normal.
Well, and that's interesting you bring that up, because I know that's three areas that you, with the work you're doing through Randy Grimes Speaks, is prevention, education, and intervention. And you kind of hit them all there. As it was almost unable to prevent it based on being within a culture that it was a norm. Where did you get the education, and let alone how did you get help? So at what point was it a conversation with the missus, with family members, where it was just like, this is a problem, look at what it's doing to me, I got to get help? Were you still active in the NFL at that time as well?
No, I mean, guys, we've got to fast forward to probably another 18 years before I got to that point. When I can still remember, in the 80s and early 90s, Tampa Bay was a revolving door of players, coaches, front office people, quarterbacks. I had 5 different head coaches in 10 years. I had 6 different offensive line coaches. I had 10 or 11 different quarterbacks, and probably 3 different general managers. The only consistent thing about the Bucs in the 80s and early 90s was Randy Grimes, the center. Somehow I seemed to survive every change that they made. But I can remember after the 92 season, I was standing at my locker, and we had just played our last game. Obviously, we weren't going to the playoffs. And back then, you would come in the day after your last game. You'd have an exit meeting with your coach. You'd watch the film from the day before. You'd clean out your locker, and then you'd be gone for the next 5 or 6 months until minicamp started again. That's how it was back then. Now it's more of a year-round job. But I remember after that last game, I was standing in my locker, and I remember Sam Weiss walked by me. And I was looking at my locker, and I just felt somebody walk behind me. I felt somebody put their hand on my shoulder. I heard the words, "Randy, we won't be needing your services anymore here in Tampa." And as I turned to look to see who that was that said that, I just saw Sam Weiss. I had a door right next to my locker, and I saw Sam Weiss hit that silver bar in the middle of that door and exit out to the coaches' offices. And I remember thinking, damn, is that how it ends? And I had hurt my foot halfway through that season. I couldn't even go try out for anybody else. I was 33 years old. I'd played every down of every year of my career in Tampa. I knew football was over. And I just remember thinking, I just can't believe that it ends like this. All the blood, sweat, and tears that I've left on football fields all over this country since 4th grade. Mm-hmm. And this is how it ends. And I don't know what I expected. I don't know if I thought I was supposed to get a parade or a street named after me or whatever, but I just didn't think it would end like that. And I just remember raking everything out of my locker into a black trash bag and walking out the back door. And Randy Grimes, the football player, didn't exist anymore. And the reason I talk about that is because I struggled for a long time, many years transitioning out of football. When I didn't have that uniform to put on anymore or that locker room to sit in, I struggled. And I thought I was ready. I thought I was preparing every year for it. You do these mental things where, yeah, I'm ready, I guess. I'm tired of being banged up. But until it really happens, you don't know how you're going to handle it. And I struggled. And I tell that story because I already had this raging addiction going. And now this on top of it was just throwing gasoline on an already raging fire. And I struggled for many years. I mean, the injuries just kept getting worse when I left the league. The chronic pain just kept getting worse. The tolerance kept getting higher. I needed more and more pills all the time. And it just was a snowball that I could never stop. And I had some great jobs. I had some great jobs when I got out of football, but I lost them all because of addiction. And houses and cars, great houses and cars, I lost them because of addiction, because I couldn't stop doing it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't stop. And I don't know, thinking back, yeah, there was still a lot of pride and ego, but it was mostly guilt and shame. You know, and at the end, in the spring and summer of 2009, that's how long this went on. And I retired in 93. You know, seems like the perfect storm was coming. And, you know, my wife my daughter wouldn't let me come around my first grandchild.
Oh, shit.
I wasn't fit to be around him. And my wife, she didn't leave me, but she couldn't live with me anymore. So she moved in with her parents because she was loving me to death, and she just couldn't stand it anymore. You know, I had a wife who loved me unconditionally. I had kids that loved me unconditionally until they couldn't stand me anymore. And that perfect storm was happening in the spring and summer of 2009. And that was part of it. The death of my good friend in Tampa, Tom McHale, who I'd played with many years, right next to me at right guard. He was out there doing the same thing I was doing, self-medicating his injuries. The guy while he played in the league, and one morning he just didn't wake up. That got my attention. And my wife was willing to make one more phone call for me. I was sleeping in the floor. Talk about guilt and shame. I was sleeping in the floor of a vacant house with no utilities. And I can remember laying in the floor of that house thinking, you know, I was a former All-American. I was a second-round draft pick. I was a 1988 NFL Man of the Year for the Buccaneers. I married my cheerleader, sweetheart, dream girl. I've got 2 great kids. And here I am laying in the floor of a vacant house with no utilities, no job, no car, no money. It took all of that for me to finally just say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And she was willing to make one more call for me. And whoever she talked to that day in New York at the league office, they didn't have a program for retired players back then.
Oh, okay.
And whoever she talked to that day just knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. And that's how I got to treatment on September 22nd, 2009.
That's amazing. What did you end up going for treatment?
I went to a treatment center, behavioral health in the Palm Beaches out in Florida. I went out in Florida.
And how many days? Was it a standard 30? Did you do a 90?
No, I did 90
afterwards?
days. I did 90 days, and I also got some assistance with some surgeries that I needed. I got a knee replaced while I was in treatment. I had the other knee scoped. I had some neck surgery done. So those 90 days were very, very planned out, and I'm very grateful to everybody that helped me with that.
Yeah. How did you manage after the surgeries and with the pain?
It wasn't easy, but you know what? They did it, and I found out that you could do it, and that's all I needed to know. I mean, I was that guy who thought I was going to have to be on opiates the rest of my life, and I thought I was going to have to be on benzos the rest of my life. You know, that I couldn't sleep without them, and but going through that process in a safe environment of rehab, you know, it showed me that you can do it, you know, that other medications that are non-narcotic do work. You know, you just got to be open-minded enough to try different things.
Absolutely. Well, we're glad to see that was the inevitable result, and that you're able to go out there and be inspirational to so many other people and share. And hopefully, you know, again, it starts with prevention first, and then, you know, education, and as you say, intervention, you know, three great steps of it. What were some of the most impactful things when you were in rehab that you started to unwind? Because, you know, there's not anyone that we speak to, and hand raise myself, that guilt and shame that is so present in every addict and their actions. How did you reconcile that along with rebuilding relationships with your kids and your wife?
Yeah, and you know, I can remember it was exactly 2 weeks into the process. They took a month detoxing me. My body was so toxic. They really didn't even want to take me, but they did, and they did it under the pretense that I would take a month to detox. So, but I remember 2 weeks into the process at 8:45 on a Wednesday morning, it's 15 minutes before that first group started. exactly 2 weeks in. I can remember sitting at a picnic table, and I used to get up every morning and I would write in a notebook how I was feeling, what I was going through, you know, what was going on around me. And I don't know why, I'm not a big writer, but for some reason it just made me feel better every morning to do that. And this particular morning I was sobbing uncontrollably. I can't imagine what a 290-pound man sitting in the middle of a rehab campus at a picnic table sobbing uncontrollably looks like, but that was me. And I couldn't get a grip on myself, but because I remember thinking, all that guilt and shame and that huge wake of destruction that I left back in Houston with my family and my friends and my reputation and everything, you know, and I was having to deal with it for the first time in my life, clean and sober, you know, and I can remember thinking, if this is what being sober feels like, I don't want to have any part of it. I couldn't get over the obsession to throw down pills every day too, because I had convinced myself that I was that one guy who needed pills for the rest of my life. And it was like at that very second, all this was going on. And this was my big burning bush moment, my spiritual awakening. It was like somebody came up behind me at that picnic table and draped a warm quilt around my shoulders. And I say quilt because I remember feeling weight and warmth on my shoulders. And it was like at that very second, all that was going on, that was all lifted off of me. And I suddenly got the confidence to do that. I knew that I could do this. Not only could I do this, but I realized I had to make it mean something. All the pain that I had caused everybody in my life back in Texas, I had to make it mean something. And that was kind of the birth of Athletes in Recovery, of Pro Athletes in Recovery, was at that picnic table. I didn't know what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. I just knew that I wanted to make everything that I'd been through mean something. And I knew that there was other guys out there that I'd played with and against that were doing the same thing I was doing. And for whatever reason, guilt, shame, pride, ego, weren't putting up their hands and asking for help, or like me, and they didn't think there was any resources available. So I wanted to make sure that I got the word out to everybody that there were resources available, that there was help, that they're not the only ones out there doing it. There's a lot of us that are out there doing that. And all you got to do is raise your hand. So that was kind of the birth of Pro Athletes in Recovery at that picnic table, even though I didn't know what it was going to be.
That's awesome. Okay.
There was a lot of layers to the onion I had to peel back. There was a lot, you know, not, of course, the guilt and shame, but the loss of identity. It was like I had to grieve the death of Randy Grimes, the football player, because, you know, I had allowed football to become who I was instead of just something I was really good at. Sure. You know, and I had to grieve that death, that I was not Randy Grimes, the football player anymore. I had to reinvent myself, redefine myself. And it was a long process. I needed every day of that 90 days.
Yeah. What was a big part of that? Because you know, you kind of have a twofold. Is it you're, you know, still grieving that change of going from being a pro athlete to, you know, normal living, as whatever you can qualify normal as, plus an addict. And addicts, we don't want to change anything. So you're not only, you got the twofold of self-identifying as an athlete and an addict all at one time, and you have to wipe both of those away. So what was the process?
When I pulled up to the treatment center that night, September 22nd, 2009, I was leaning against the door, and somebody opened the door at the treatment center, and I just fell out. I was so sick and broken, and I fell out onto the pavement, and there was about another 30 feet to crawl through the door, or to make it through the door and I crawled on all fours from the car through that door. And I like to think that same desperation that I had crawling through the door that night, I like to think that I kept that full 90 days. And that, you know, I finally was broken, and I was finally surrendered enough to say, you know what, my way's not working. It never has worked. It's gotten me here. So I'm ready to listen to suggestions. I want to know how other people have done this, you know, because I want my life back. I want my family back. I want my reputation back. And, you know, I like to think that even today, you know, nearly 12 years later, that I still had that same gift of desperation that I crawled in the door that night with. And you know, I think I'm a pretty badass. I think I've been in a lot of battles, and not only at Baylor, but 10 years in the pros, and I've won most of those battles. You don't get to stay in the league that long unless you're winning most of those battles. But crawling through the door that night, that was the toughest thing I ever did.
Man, I can only imagine, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, on all those levels.
5150 is power. The power to overcome. The power to persevere. The power to set your life on a course for success. When you're faced with the challenges life throws at you, you focus and do what is needed to go beyond what is required. So stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness, knocking doors down along the way. We are 5150.
And it was, you know, like I said, there was a lot of layers to the onion that had to be peeled back. I mean, I could have stayed a year in treatment and probably not got everything done. But, you know, I did everything they asked me to do after treatment. I continued with an outpatient therapist every week. You know, I moved into sober living here in Florida, even though I had a family back in Houston. I stayed out here. I did everything they told me to do. I did everything that they said would help me be successful at staying sober. And I was willing. I was still desperate when that door hit me in the ass after 90 days. I was still desperate to continue on this. And, you know, I would come back, even though I was discharged and I was not even a client anymore of the facility. I would come back on campus every day and just pick up cigarette butts, just because I needed those people that were my new safe people. I needed them to hear my voice and see my eyes every day. I needed that accountability for a long time because, you know, we as athletes, that's what we thrive on, on accountability, on structure, on itineraries. You know, we want to prove ourselves on a daily basis. And I needed to continue to do that with them. And yeah, I'd come back on campus and just pick up cigarette butts. I'd walk around and they would let me. And I was in my safe place.
Yeah, which is totally necessary. So you said that, you know, in there, the antithesis for pro athletes in recovery, how did it come about? Was it something where you got enough long-term sobriety and you just looked at the misses and went, this is what I want to do?
Yeah. Well, like I told you, there was no resources out there for former players back when I came in. So, excuse me. I started talking with some friends that I had at the NFL Alumni Association. They were splitting off. They were going to form a new division called the Player Care Foundation. They were going to start reaching out to former players. They knew that I was already reaching out to former players. And so we just kind of had a little partnership. And, you know, for the next, well, even today, all the way through today, you know, we still are getting the word out that there's resources available. There's help out there. All you got to do is put your hand up and ask for help. You know, all the talking that I've done and all the traveling that I've done in the last 12 years is, you know, all about that. And that's just getting the word out to these guys that they don't have to suffer in silence anymore, that there is help and hope out there, that you put your guilt and shame aside, you know, put your egos aside and put your hand up and ask for help, that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not ask for help. Sure. So, you know, I'm grateful. Not only we were so successful with that program that MLB came on board with the baseball assistance team, you know, NBA, the NHL, the jockeys deal, former jockeys were coming in, you know, motorsports safety group, former race car drivers, right here in the heart of golf world. You know, I had former golfers coming in, and it was just pretty much former athletes from every sport. I've had the opportunity to get to know and help through this process. I love it. I love it. It's you know what? It's been a way for me to stay connected to the game that I love so much. Yeah. That gave me so much, you know. I never thought it would be like this, but It is what it is, right?
Boy,
Yeah, absolutely.
boy, that what was it? We were talking with Lamar Odom, Mikey, and he said it was referencing his grandma, where she said something like, "Oh, you want to make God laugh? Tell him your plans," and
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
and we just never know how it's going to turn out. I certainly wouldn't have thought of 20 years ago from a radio broadcasting career that this is what I'd be doing on this day. So
There you go.
gotta
Who
love it.
Yeah, I say the same thing. Who would have ever thought it? But now looking back, it's almost like God was using those 10 years in the NFL to prepare me for what I do now, because this is life and death stuff here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is no joke. There's guys that are committing suicide. There's guys that are drinking themselves to death, and obviously not just athletes. This is everybody. And this is we're in a pandemic within a pandemic, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah, it is. And it's been the unfortunate thing of the global pandemic. And I'm sure, not looking at stats of other countries and stuff, but the amount of relapse that we've seen of folks too has just been incredibly disheartening. I know I had to get back active with the group sponsor during these times,
Well, and what's the one thing they're telling everybody to do is the one thing we tell everybody not to do, and that's isolate.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's the worst thing you can do in recovery. And thank God for Zoom, but it's not the same. That without that human interaction, it's just not the same. Without sitting down with your sponsor, at least once a week, it's just not the same. And we all have just done the best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of that 10 years of NFL, Mikey, could we get a little NFL talk in here, Randy?
I'm game.
All right.
Randy, how do you feel about the new rules implicated as opposed to the lack of rules back then? I'm talking helmet to helmet, hit on a defenseless player, because people like Ronnie Lott would have been out of a job in today's game.
Yeah, we were watching the videos on your RandyGrimesSpeaks.com website. Folks, go there definitely for more on Randy, but to watch some of those videos as well. So we were like, oh, we got to ask him about that.
It's a different game now, that's for sure. There's a lot of guys that are protected. And you're right, guys like Ronnie Lott, Van McElroy, guys that, those hard hitting free safeties, they wouldn't be in the game anymore, or they wouldn't be. They'd be extra penalized. So
they'd be getting fined every other week. They'd be getting fined every other week. They'd be out of money.
Yeah. You're exactly right. And the game has just changed so much. And my hope is that it doesn't get too watered down. I think we can overthink this too much and penalize these guys too much to where it's not even a watchable, product anymore. But hopefully it doesn't get to that point. It's getting close though. It's getting close. And I just want the officiating to be consistent.
Exactly.
Week after week.
Exactly. Because you get a young Jimmy Garoppolo as opposed to like a Drew Brees or a Tom Brady. They're not going to give Jimmy G this, or not even Jimmy G, because I'm a Niners fan, I'll sound biased. We'll say Derek Carr or something like that. They're not going to give Derek Carr the same call they would Drew Brees or Tom Brady. And I completely disagree with that. You got to be consistent. If you're going to throw the flag here, then you got to throw the flag there as well. It's just being fair. There was a clip with Cam Newton. He went up to a ref and said something, and the ref was like, "You're too young for that call." And he said it dead serious. He wasn't being sarcastic or joking. He said, "You're too young for that call," and kept walking. And it's like, how the fuck is that right? And I don't even like Cam Newton or the Panthers at the time or the Patriots now. But
like I said, the games have changed a lot, and and to my point, the consistency with the umpiring is it's got to get better.
Absolutely.
And that's not just in the NFL. That's with the final, with March Madness too.
Oh, sure.
I mean, just the consistency in the different ref crews. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Do we not have a 3-second rule anymore, or traveling? I see guys walking down the court with the ball.
Yeah.
Well, and some are targeted. I mean, you get like the Draymond Greens. That guy gets teed up every game he's in. It's almost like the refs specifically just watch him. And
you
in
get
football,
that reputation. Yeah.
yeah. It's like they're like, I know he's going to do something stupid. I'm just waiting for it. If he sneezes and doesn't say bless you, tee up, get out of here. It's like, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's
Well,
definitely
but sometimes guys get targets on their back. You know, I think about Sue with the Bucks. You know,
Oh, yeah.
defensive lineman. You know,
Yeah.
he got a really nasty reputation, and now all eyes are on him all the time. You know,
Absolutely.
so you got to be careful with as a player too, what kind of reputation you get.
You just gotta, yeah, you're absolutely right. And when I think of guys with targets on their backs, forgive me, it's biased, it's all Niners, but I think of Dante Whitner. Dante Whitner used to light people up all the time, and that dude would get flagged every play. And I'm just like, dude, football's a contact sport. You know what you signed up for when you put those pads on. You're going to get your clock rocked sometimes. And just because you got hit really well doesn't mean it's a flag. If I put my shoulder to your chest, that's clean. But being that his head flung back, nope, that's a flag. Hit on a defenseless player. It's like, so what do you want me to do? Two-hand touch? You know,
Right.
It's just.
And sometimes it's almost impossible to not lead with your helmet. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
as you're coming
instinct,
there,
right? Yeah.
your head's going to always hit first. You know, if you start getting guys hitting with their shoulders first, you're going to have stingers. You're going to have guys getting hurt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And ending careers out there. Yeah, concussion's going to end your career. A broken neck's going to end your career. But I think that's the way the game's always been played. And you start trying to tackle with your shoulder, and then that's a whole other set of problems.
And, you know, the technology they put into the helmets and stuff now for concussion protocol, I think that's great. That's awesome that they're doing that. I mean, you gotta, because that affects your mental health further down the line. You know what I'm saying? So I'm glad that they're doing that. But also at the same time, like you said, it can't be watered down too much. I mean, it still is a contact sport. You know, it's pretty gnarly. So, and you played in the years where, hey, man, that's fair game. No flag there. That was clean. You know what I mean? So props to you for being 10 years in that.
Because those highlights were like, holy shit.
Oh, the highlights. I'm like, goodness gracious. I was telling off Jason, I'm like, that's a flag, helmet to helmet, hit on defenseless player. You can't do any of that nowadays. All of that's flags now.
I can remember my first start was in Texas Stadium, and I had to play left guard. This was my rookie year. Our left guard went down during warm-ups because the reason he went down is because he didn't want to have to play against Randy White. But my first start in the NFL was at left guard. I'd never played guard in my life, and I had to play against Randy White. And that's back when they could just head slap you and club you.
Yep.
I mean, anything goes. And of course, holding, they were flagging that back then, but man, defensive lineman could get away with anything. And I can remember him head slapping me and clubbing me. And I can remember him helping me up one time off the field and asking me to quit calling him sir. And I said, yes, I will. I said, yes, sir, I'll quit calling you sir. And, but you know, that's the way we played the game back then. I grew up a lot that day. You know, I became a man, a real NFLer that day because of Randy White and what I had to do to not embarrass myself.
Kind of welcoming you in, huh?
Exactly.
Welcome to the club, kid.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we get to we do some fun random questions and leave you with the last word. But do you have any other some of your favorite NFL moments and stories that you could share with us?
You know, I can remember after that story right there. Matter of fact, the very next year we played in Canton at the Hall of Fame game, played Seattle or whoever anyway. But we got off the bus as a team and we toured the Hall of Fame. And as we turned the corner, there was a room set up and it had, you know, all the sports writers and photographers from the year before would submit their pictures and the best ones would be in the Hall of Fame. And there was a mural that was probably 10 feet by 10 feet hanging on the wall there. And it was a picture of that game of Randy White. My helmet was turned sideways. I was looking out the ear hole. He's reaching over me. I'm all crumbled up and he's grabbing the quarterback. And that picture was the picture of the year that year for the Hall of Fame. And I had all my teammates with me. We all just stood around that picture, you know, and looking at it. It took me it took me the rest of my career to downplay that, but I had that, but I played with such great guys like Steve DeBerg and Jack Thompson and Steve Young. That was one of the funnest years I had, was blocking for that guy, which we never knew where he was because he was always running around trying to make something happen. He was supposed to have been in the pocket 7 yards deep, but no, he's out running around.
I freaking love that guy, man.
We'd have to tape these eyes on the back of our helmets so we could try to keep up with where he was back there. Yeah. But and even Vinny, I had a great time with Vinny. Vinny was a better quarterback than he got credit for. He just didn't have the coaching when he came to the Bucs. He didn't have that great quarterback counselor, somebody that could really teach him the game. They just gave him a playbook, stuck him in the huddle, and told him to be the Heisman Trophy winner, and that was tough on him. Yeah. But he went on to have a long career, a great career. And so I got to play with a lot of people. I got to play with a lot of great players, a lot of Hall of Famers. And, I wouldn't trade, even though everything that happened to me was because of my time in the NFL. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was the best days of my life. And people ask me all the time what I miss most about football. And it's not the game. I miss the locker room. Yeah. I miss sitting around and bullshitting with the guys. Us offensive linemen, we used to come over to the stadium 4 hours before everybody else. And we'd sit around and bullshit and tape our pads and tape our jerseys to our pads and make sure there was no loose material anywhere. It was a routine, and I miss all those times with everybody. But that's what recovery's given me back too, is an opportunity to be with like-minded people, all trying to accomplish the same thing. So I'm grateful for that. I found my locker room again.
Absolutely.
Heck yeah.
That's
awesome.
I
love that. Well, Randy, before we give you the final words, we like to jump into some fun random questions here, just to have fun with them. Let's see. Do you have any guilty pleasures?
Copenhagen and chocolate.
I have a chewing tobacco habit too.
I need to give them both. Hanging out on the beach too much too.
That's
why my skin looks like a catcher's mitt.
No, we're just jealous. We're in Central California. People go, by the beach? No, we're where it's dismal.
You're in California? Oh, how's the beach? It's like, I don't know, bro. It's like a 2-hour drive for me. I'm not at the beach.
Hey, my brother's moving to Tampa soon. I'll have to hit you up and meet up with you. But I envy the beach. I grew up near Monterey, so I love the beach time. What do you got, Mikey?
All right. If you were stuck on a deserted island and you could take one movie and one album with you, what would those be?
Wow.
I know.
It would be a Fleetwood Mac album.
Okay, I think Fleetwood.
And wow, I don't know. I guess it'd probably be like Saving Private Ryan. I love that movie.
Oh yeah. That would be a tough one though. That every time, man, they storm the beach, it's tears.
I know.
Yeah, and if I have to say, you're going the Fleetwood Mac route, I don't know. Rumors kind of hard to pass that one up.
You can't go wrong with Rumors, right?
Absolutely. All right. Let's see. What's your favorite hobby now for yourself?
You know what? I've got 4 grandkids now. You know what? I wrote a book recently too, and let me tell you about this book. It's at final editing now. It's called Off Center. Hopefully, it'll be out this summer. And the fact that I wrote a book is not what I want to talk about. I asked my family to help me write this book, and it turned out to be a real healing process for the entire Grimes family. So whether or not the book sells a copy or not, I could care less. The effects of it and the platform that it gave everybody to tell their side of what happened with me and what I went through, it was a beautiful healing experience. So, still working on the book. It'll be coming out hopefully this summer.
Love it.
That's been a savior, hanging out with the grandkids and doing beach stuff, man. That's what we do.
I love it. That's awesome.
After this chat, consider at least 2 books of yours being purchased, man. We'll definitely
Absolutely.
get in on that.
Yeah, and I love that.
I'll send you guys some. I'll take care of it.
I love that format because we had spoken with Tom Farley, Chris Farley's brother, and when he did the book on Chris, he went and spoke with different cast members of Tom's or of Chris's that were friends of his and stuff, and so it gave this totally different perspective, and it was really cathartic and healing for him. And I've seen some other formats that way, so it's really cool that that gift of bringing the family and the union together. It's cool when you're sitting there, got me a little emotional saying, boy, my first grandkid didn't even get that experience. Now here you are, 4 grandkids and
right.
The beach time and all the great stuff. It's so cool. And it's that power of recovery and how people can really make a better life than what they had before.
That's right. That's right. There's hope and help out there.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. All right. If they were to make a movie about you, Randy Grimes, who would you cast to play you?
Oh, The Rock, of course.
Oh, yeah, The Rock.
Splitting images, He's like my doppelganger, my twin.
Hey, I thought it was him when we first got on this call. I was like, Dwayne?
Dwayne Johnson, that's right.
What are you doing here, Dwayne?
That would be cool. He was a defensive tackle, though, wasn't he? I can't remember.
Yeah, he was at Miami.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, very cool. All right, let's see. We'll go one more of these here. It's pretty fun. Here's a good one. If you could have dinner with just one person, living or not, who would it be and why?
Wow. My mom would get mad at me if I didn't say like Jesus or something. That's like going too far. Probably like I think it would probably be Ronald Reagan.
Interesting. Why is that?
I don't know. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to hear his takes on everything, I just want to, especially with everything that's going on right now. How would he have handled it? I don't just that's just off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's a good one because I remember vividly as a kid, my mom said for whatever reason when Ronald Reagan got up there and did his speech that I was just glued to the TV. She's like, you were so fascinated with Ronald Reagan. I'm like, well, my grandpa forced me to watch all of his movies too. So, it's kind of like, well, that's the guy in the movie and he could be president. That's pretty cool.
There's so many cool people out there, like John Wayne and, there's some great coaches that I'd like to pick their brain. So, we could go all day with who we'd like to have that last meal with.
Oh, sure. God, yes, absolutely. Do you want to do any more, Mike, or are we going to give Randy the last word?
Let's give Randy the last word.
So what we ask, Randy, is that, through all of your experience, amazing work you're doing with pro athletes in recovery, as well as randygrimespeaks.com. People go there for more on Randy. Hopefully we get these speaking engagements in person going again soon, but of course you're still so active in the recovery community and reaching out to people in need. What are some encouraging words through your experience that you can give to anyone who's seeking recovery, in recovery, or even their loved ones?
Well, and let me start by saying that you can also find me at proathletesinrecovery.org.
Okay.
Like you said, randygrimespeaks.com. Of course, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, Sober Center 60. If you can't find me, then you're not trying very hard because I'm everywhere. But, my message when I go out and talk is that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not ask for help, and that there is hope and help out there, and that recovery does work. I've seen hundreds and hundreds, thousands of cases, of people getting their lives back, their families back. Their reputations back, everything that I wanted that day when I was sitting at that picnic table in the middle of campus, and it does work, and that there is hope and help out there.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Randy Grimes, this has been a real honor and a pleasure to speak with you. Can't thank you enough for your time.
Thank you all very much for this opportunity.